This week on Rockstar Superhero. Tom MacLean has breathed some pretty rarefied air. As the original bass player for the mega-popular progressive rock band Haken, Tom saw the band rise to heights not often attained. At the very crest, Tom made a change to his life that confused half of the music business and left Haken seemingly within reach of everything a musician strives for. Today on the show, we not only dig into Tom's backstory, but more importantly, we get a chat about his new musical endeavors, and specifically his amazing new band, Athemon. The new release from the band will find its way to your phones, laptops, and living room as soon as you decide to buy it. The music that starts the show today is a sample, and something that I believe will resonate in the minds of our future youth as a touchstone of influence. I'd make a bet on it. This is my interview with the legendary instrumentalist and producer, Tom MacLean, on the Rockstar Superhero Podcast. I've loved your playing for years, and have this come up seemingly out of nowhere just gives me immense joy, and it boggles my mind. So thanks for being a part of this today.
Thank you for inviting me, Rob.
Yeah. I've heard that your partner in this project, I believe his name is it Adriano?
Yeah.
Okay. There's that baby.
Yeah.
Wrote some material with you in mind, and he reached out to see if you'd be open. And I was curious. I'm sure you've done this many times, but because our listeners don't have access to your press release, can you break the story down a bit for the listeners?
Yeah. So it was right at the beginning of global lockdown, which I think for us here in the UK was in March 2020.
Yeah.
And I had pretty much just set up an online studio business, and lockdown kicked in. And initially I thought, well, that's problematic because now I can't go and meet people and have drinks and convince them to work with me and stuff. And I'm like,
right.
I've got to work on online promotion, which I hate. And I'm always suspicious that Facebook has some kind of algorithm that suppresses all my posts anyways. So
right.
I'm like, okay, this is going to be hard, but at the same time, pretty much the same week. Well, it must have been a few weeks in when all the concerts started getting cancelled and stuff. So Ray from Haken reached out and said, look, we think you're selling the demo. Are you okay with that? I'm like, well, yeah, fine.
Wow.
Do I get a kickback?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, yeah, sure. They'll figure something out. But I said, in the meantime, I've just set up this online business. It'd be a great help if you could get the word out. And eventually, when it was sufficiently on brand, they put out a post saying, "Look, Tom set up this business," and it was really helpful. I got a flood of requests. I mean, I didn't end up working with half the people who got in touch.
Yeah.
Some of it was way beyond my level. Some of it wasn't there yet in the first place. But I got a handful of people who were just the right kind of level, where they were competent musicians, talented musicians, good composers, good performers, and all that stuff. But they just didn't know how to put a record together.
Yeah.
And Adriano was one of those guys. But in his case, when he sent me the demo, I was just absolutely blown away. Like it's been through some transformations, obviously, since the initial demo. He recorded the whole thing on Garage Band with I think a native guitar sim plugin, which, despite the fact that the guitar sound was terrible, you could just tell. You could tell there was some raw gold in there. He's got such a great natural tone that it doesn't really matter if he's using a crappy amp sim. It just really screams. And then, I heard the demo. I've had, it kind of sounds like something that I've come across, but equally, it's something unique. And unlike the other projects where I was like, look, okay, this is how much I charge, this is what we'll do. With this one, like, I kind of, and he didn't explicitly ask. That was the clever thing. He's a bit of a businessman, Adriano. He never explicitly asked if I wanted to be involved, but I think he must have known that I'd be up for it. And then, so yeah, I was just blown away by the demos and thought, wow, I actually want to be a part of it. I don't just want to be someone on the side, helping you choose your amp tones and drum samples and stuff like that. I want to actually be a part of this creative process, and so yeah, we kicked off from there, and it was a real journey, and I'm really proud of the product at the end of it. There's so much so that I'm fully endorsing it as one of my own projects. So that's basically the story there.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And that obviously brings you here today. Thank you. I love that. COVID has become the great equalizer, hasn't it? It's forced creativity in a time where people didn't realize sort of how they were going to find their way out of this hole that the world has been placed in. But in the case of Adriano, and even in your situation, given that, you're, building this brand in this studio, it's sort of promoted the idea that if you really love something, you go after it, you make something of it, and be prepared for these moments, because these happy accidents occur when you, as a producer, hear something and say, wait a minute, I want to be a part of it. And give it to Adriano for saying, I bet you Tom would like this.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because at first I wasn't sure what his angle was, to be completely honest. He was sending me all this stuff. Like, he's been quite forward. I could tell he was you could tell he was confident in the product, and rightly so. And he's very passionate. He's very driven. And he likes to talk. He's got that true Latin passion. He can really talk for hours uninterrupted. In fact, his initial music communication wasn't even messages. Like he just left voice messages on Messenger and WhatsApp and stuff. I just wake up one morning, obviously, time zone difference. He'd be up at night, just leaving me loads of messages, and I'd be like, oh no, I've got like an hour's worth of voice messages from Adriano.
He's spamming you in the middle of the night.
Yeah, exactly. He didn't have to give me the hard sell, honestly. I mean, once I'd heard the kind of demos, I'm like, wow, if that's done properly, if it's recorded right, and I mean, we marginally rewrote a few details. We totally rewrote the original vocal tracks. Very different. I think he was going more for a slightly gruff, growly kind of approach initially, and he's got a much stronger, clean voice, so we really kind of forced him to go down that road, and he went away. And I've got to be honest, I was probably a little hard on him for quite some time, because I wanted his vocals to match the quality of the guitar playing and the composition. And I'm not saying we were going at each other, but I'm like, this is going to be a sick album. You've got to level up. And he went away and he leveled up. I mean, all credit to him. He did a really fantastic final vocal performance. So
yeah. Well, I know we'll get to it in a few moments, but I do love this record. It is fantastic. And that is a word I'm prone to using quite a bit. But again, I really truly mean it. It's not it's just an obvious piece of my vocabulary. So
appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, it goes to show you, though, that if you're writing excellent, motivating material, and that other artists are hearing it in the way you would hope they would, and being prepared for the moment, somebody like Adriano can reach out to their hero, right? And who might very well be open to working, with them. And so I'm curious. One of the first things I thought of when I was going to talk to you today was, how does it feel to know that you're somebody's sort of musical Valentine?
Obviously, it's flattering. And it's also quite surreal because on a day-to-day basis, I've got to say, right up until lockdown, I don't want to sound too poignant, but I really felt I'd let music run away. Like I just had no time. I was working every spare hour, and when I wasn't, I was commuting, and then it was family time, and there was a point, I don't know when, but at some point I stopped practicing, I stopped writing, and his was just gathering dust. During that time, I guess we're going back to 2018, 2019, I kind of quit. I'll be honest, I hate to use that word, but not so much actively going, right, that's it, I've had it. But I just stopped making the effort. And when you stop making it a habit, making it part of your routine, it easily drops out. Mm-hmm. But I did decide at some point, maybe this will come up later on if it's relevant, but I had started getting into more the production side of things, because I thought, well, if I'm not being creative so much, I'm not practicing my instrument a lot, it's at least some way to kind of keep my, what's the expression? Keep my finger, no.
Yeah, keep your finger on the pulse.
Keep my hand in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so keep my hand in kind of in a less... I find the thing with creativity is, it is a discipline. It's like going to the gym. You have to do it at least several times a week for it to be worth doing it, to make any progress with it. But it is emotionally draining at the same time. It's not an automatic kind of mechanical process like exercising might be. And I didn't have the headspace for creativity. I didn't have the drive. I didn't even think, I didn't think I had another album in me, to be honest. I kind of said all I wanted to say at that point. And I thought, well, I'll just sit around and wait and see if something inspires me. But which is madness, of course, but it was a cop out. But I did force myself to do a production course, and that kept me involved. That kept me interested, and it actually kind of forced me to totally upend the way in which I thought about music, the way I listened to it, almost start from scratch. Mm-hmm. And I think whether I realized it or not, because that wasn't necessarily what I went into the course looking for, but I think that was something I really needed at that point, to just go, okay, right, you've got stuck, basically. Yeah. And you can't find a way. So what you do is you're literally going back to first principles and going, well, what is it about? What is sound? How do we perceive music? All that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Rebuilding my appreciation of it. But even then, as I said, more or less full-time job, busy family life and stuff like that. It was very much something that I just did kind of in the middle of the night when everyone was in bed. It wasn't like a serious kind of raging passion or anything, but, ironically, lockdown came along and stopped me working all the time and said, well, now you've got opportunities to do something else. Mm-hmm. And really allowed me to re-engage with that passion again. And it's such a difficult thing to encapsulate, because obviously on a global scale, it's been an absolute disaster in so many ways. Mm-hmm. And yet, just purely on a personal level, if it hadn't happened, I don't know where, I'd have just lost it. I think I'd have just gone crazy just with the day job and the commuting, and probably had a midlife crisis and run off to live in I don't know, on a desert island or something. Oh, so there it is.
Yeah, Tom. Have
we got to talk about this, Rob?
Well, I think this is really important. I mean, so I have no choice, because of what you've just said, to now heap my own story into your story.
I'd love to hear it.
All right. So the listeners who have heard this a few times are now going to roll off. But that being said,
or just fast forward. Right?
Yeah, I think this is this is incredibly important. This might be the most important thing I've ever had on the show, what you just said, because my pursuit on this side, see, you don't know this because you don't know anything about me, but I was a professional drummer for 25 years. And in 2003, after 2 failed record deals and a whole bunch of other emotional baggage, things that had just caught up with me over the years. I had gone through a divorce. I had a number of other personal issues that were so significant that they were devastating. And I walked through, and am still actually kind of still walking through, a bout of depression. I had never experienced depression. All of a sudden, I was in a midlife crisis. At the time, I was 37 years old. And I felt like I was past my musical prime. And yet I had been playing since I was 4. And so I had this massive skill set and no way to seemingly get it out. So I quit. I just flat out quit. And then 9 years later, I did a recording. I did a session with a local guitarist here. And I hated every second of it. I just couldn't get out of the funk. And that was 9 years ago. Today, I just saw it on Facebook. 9 years ago today, I did my last session.
Oh, wow.
And so here you come on the show today, and you're telling me about your experiences. And of course, I'm very cautious about treading over the Haken thing. But when you left the band, everything in my brain said, oh, he's done. And I recognize. And I recognize in you being done, if that makes sense, because I felt like I saw you. See, you don't know this again because you don't know what a fan I was, but I saw this sort of hero walk away, and I thought, oh, I recognize that. I've done that myself. There was something about it that was overwhelming, and maybe my desire to have a family, maybe your desire to have a family.
Well, I can talk. I'm quite happy to talk about it. It's not what a lot of people think, actually.
Okay, please, if you don't mind.
Yeah, it was awkward because, it's something that I never really knew how to express, but at the time, so I just thought, I'll let people figure out their own story. So then, look at all the theories on the forums, going, oh, that's an interesting one. Yeah, maybe. It was simply that. I remember, I don't remember the words I used at the time. I remember I did release a statement for the band to put out. And the weird thing was, I didn't feel done, as in, I didn't feel like, right, I've just run out of creativity. But I did feel just done with that particular path. It was more, for example, so we can go back to the beginning of Haken if you want, and
sure.
I didn't own a bass before Richard and then Matt, who was a guitarist at the time. They turned up at my house for a guitar lesson. But obviously, they were just scouting.
Sure,
they're quite cheeky characters. Anyway, so they turned up. I taught them some licks or whatever, and then they got in touch and said, "Look, we've got a gig next week, but our bassist isn't cutting it. Will you play bass?" And I'm like, well, yeah, like they sent me this stuff. I'm like, well, this is really cool. So I went and bought a bass, played some shows, and I really enjoyed the shows. But it really took me a while to get into my head that I could play the bass as a serious instrument. I don't want that to sound like I'm aloof or a snob or whatever.
No,
but it didn't come naturally to me. It took a lot of work. And when we did Aquarius, I was really disappointed with it. Like, I was really going for it. And I bought a fretless because I thought, that'll make me really unique and special, right? I'll play a fretless on a rock album.
Look at me go.
Yeah, look how quirky I am. And
I drive a Saab.
Yeah, exactly. That kind of thing. I recorded it all. And at the time, I'm like, yeah, I'm really proud of that. Yeah, like I'm really good at the bass. But I wasn't that great at home production anyway. So like I was recording everything in kind of single takes and taking best takes. I wasn't doing all the editing, the heavy editing that, let's be honest, is par for the course on any kind of serious prog album. I just didn't know how to do it. I was like, yeah, let's just record these bars. That's the best take. And so when the album came out and I'd heard all the effort that those guys had put into their parts, I'm like, oh crap, I've really underperformed on this album. So I went away for Visions, got a new bass teacher, got a new bass, and then Visions came out like, yeah, okay, that's a statement. Right? I've really put my bass playing on the line on that one. And then weirdly after that, I'm like, well, you know, now it's just more of the same. Like, I've learned, you know, I've kind of learned how to play this instrument to a semi-competent level. And then, you know, when we did, by the time we got around to the mountain, I'd been through a number of basses. I'd fine-tuned my, you know, the bass that I use and my technique and stuff like, right, now I have a bass that I can play, because I did Visions on a Yamaha TRBC. Right? I don't know if you know that bass. It's like it's like a tree trunk. Like it's gigantic and it weighs like 10 kilograms. And it was too much. So by the time we got to the mountain, I had my two really kind of sleek, beautiful basses that I could really play, you know, with effortlessly. I'd been working my technique. I'd been doing extra lessons. I'd even joined an online, it was one of these online academies with these LA session guys.
Oh, right.
Daily exercise. I was going really hard for it. I was practicing all the time. And, you know, I laid down the mountain and that came back and I'm like, that is literally it. I have nothing more to say about the bass. And maybe on some deep level, maybe it was a kind of burnout, because that maybe you're thinking, well, there's more to life than just being the best bassist in the world. I mean, that, but you know, you have to understand the mentality of that band.
Yes,
was always be the best in the world, and I'm not understating that at all. Like there was no room for second best, and so I don't know if that helps kind of illuminate more the kind of mentality that we all had at the time. It was very much like, you're going to practice your instrument hard. You're going to be elite and outstanding. And so I'd lay that album down and I just kind of felt like, oh, this is exhausting. And I wasn't enjoying playing the bass anymore by that point. I was practicing so hard. And I got sick of it. So I guess it is kind of a burnout. And, you know, a lot of people are like, well, you know, you had this amazing opportunity to go off and I knew what was coming. I mean, a lot of these, you know, these big shows, these big tours, they were already on the table at the time, and it wasn't like I walked off without knowing what was around the corner, like I knew full well. And I just thought, I don't care if you say we're going on tour with Dream Theater for 6 months. I'm like, I don't want to do it. I can't do it.
Yeah.
And so I just totally. I guess it is. I guess it's a burnout. But the problem is, at the time, I didn't feel there's anyone I could say that to, because everyone was looking at, oh, you're doing so well, oh, you know, look at your career, all this kind of stuff. But inside I'm like, oh, let me stop I don't want to do it. So but equally, I mean, some things were coming up. I mean, I have to say, you know, first and foremost, I'm a guitarist and always be, that's kind of how I always think of myself. And the Athemon album came about because I'm like, you know, fuck it, let's try and do another bass album. Maybe I still have some stuff left. And I feel like, you know, I might have been able to kind of actually put down something that's a worthwhile statement. I feel like maybe it is actually a musical progression on other things that I've done, at least personally. So another thing that kind of triggered it was that whilst I was getting bass burnout, I mean, there was a certain band that I was a big fan of at the time, not a huge band, and they don't exist anymore. And I should probably just leave it at that, because I don't want to. But anyway, they invited me to join the band as their guitarist.
Yeah, I understand.
And I'm like, okay, so look, I mean, Haken's going to do great whether I'm in it or not. I was generally how I thought. You know, it might sound a bit academic and detached, but you know, I generally thought, you know, they'll find someone and they'll figure stuff out. I didn't think everything would fall apart if I walked away. Meanwhile, you know, I had an opportunity to do something that was more attuned to what I was into and grow, you know, continue to grow in a different direction that I was, at the time, I was more interested in anyway. The irony is that actually fell through because the band split up. It was there in the back of my head going, I'm being tempted. And the fact that I feel this way,
there it is. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes me think, well, maybe I've just got to take a risk. And even though in the end that led to nothing, ironically, I had to pursue it, because otherwise I'd have just been going out on tours like a dead zombie, hating everyone and wanting to just go home.
Yeah.
So, it's actually, I wish I could have said, oh, I had some major traumatic event, but I was just a bit like, oh, I don't know, I'm done. Well, okay, you said he's done, but yeah, maybe I was done, and just not in the way I thought it was. So yeah.
Well, I mean, to me, again, as an American and on the outside of that, meaning in America, of course, we're fed a different type of music for the most part altogether, right? Europe is very commonly popular for progressive music. All sorts of bands from America actually go to the UK or wherever in Europe to play festivals, because there's a crowd for it. There's a very small crowd for progressive music here in the States. And so when you left Haken, everything in my brain, and of course the lack of information, unless I'm really, really online searching for it, right? It was very small. So
I didn't give any information. I was like, this is me. Bye.
Right. And so, I would look at it and say, well, okay, he's either burnt out, or, he had such a negative experience that he just needed to step away, or perhaps there was a personal issue. None of it matters. I love that you've shared it with me, because I do know that our listeners, as well as a number of other bands I talk to, this is the artist's dilemma, Tom, right? There's and I'm not trying to equate myself into your story here, but there's this thing, it's planted in us when we're born. It's part of our DNA. It's part of our soul. It's part of our spirit. This innate ability to play, this innate desire to create, and this inability to explain how we feel unless it's through that creation. And so what happens is that communication thing is done through music. And because we're all human and we're looking to fill that God-sized hole in ourselves, when we're not being fed, or we're not somehow feeding ourselves what we think we need, we don't know where to go. And so we're searching and we're searching and we're searching. And then we start doing, as you had said, you start looking for other opportunities. It's kind of like marriage. We say, right? We say oh man, I fell in love with her, but she's not who I thought she was. Yeah. And then we start looking around, and that's exactly what's wrong with humanity is it's so hard to commit. Yeah. So I just applaud you for sharing the story. And thank you so much for having the courage to be a creative in a space that now supports other artists, because this is, again, what drew me to you is that I feel like we have this connection, because these are my personal pursuits too, is how do you elevate others with the gifts you've been given? And I thank you so much for sharing this. It's really special, actually.
You know what? I mean, what I find incredible, no one's ever asked me, like, literally no one, because they all assume it's been something really dark and they'd rather not hear it. Like, there's some big crisis, or like some sordid stuff going on in the band, or money, or it was just like I was just done with being that person in that particular scenario, and I didn't feel it was me. I didn't feel it. It's cringy to say, but I just didn't feel I was being honest with myself. And I'll tell you a very strange thing, how, when they were obviously casting around, and eventually they, they got all these YouTube auditions and stuff. And I think there's an accident, possibly, I don't know if it's just fate, Ray accidentally sent me Connor's audition. And I just saw it and I thought, yeah, this guy's great. He's got food, he's got the passion. And the weird thing was, I wasn't looking at it thinking, oh no, that guy's taking my place. Right. It was more like, oh yeah, no, that's the one. Yeah. And so I never, I think the fact that I didn't feel this kind of overpowering like rage or envy or regret, I mean, there's regret in different ways, but the regret is more not so much leaving the band, but more the fact that all the options I thought I had actually just dried up, and I had to start from scratch. That was the regret. But yeah, I mean, yeah, and I do miss them. I do regret that I didn't get to do some of the tours at least. But given the headspace I was in at the time, I mean, it just wouldn't have gone any further. So
yeah.
But I get occasionally I get the odd perk from my history. So like coming back full circle, like people like Adriano getting in touch and saying, "Oh, you're this dude who used to do stuff a long time ago. do you still do stuff?" And I was like, "Well, no, but now I can." Now I've got time.
Yeah, you've been immortalized as a puppet. That's how we have to.
Well, that works for me. I can live with that.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you. As much as I would love to stay on this forever, that would be my own personal selfish pursuits. But let's talk a little bit about this new album. Is that okay?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to read a tiny little part from your press release, and then I want to ask you a question. It says the new album is a 50-minute concept album divided into 9 songs. And of course, I've listened to the whole thing. I really, really enjoy it, and we'll get to a few of the songs here. But it says that it tells a story about self-awareness, okay? But from what I can tell, and I'm not saying that's incorrect, because that's, it's not my place to judge. But what I love about music, and especially progressive music, is that there is so much going on, and that myself, at least as an instrumentalist, not necessarily listening to lyrics or reading song titles, the music takes me to a different place than the song probably intended. And what I hear personally is an album that is actually about spiritualism, sort of an unexplainable space between what we believe we see and what we hope for. And I'm curious, with my take on it, the music, how do you see the songs yourself? I mean, do you see them strictly as they were created, or do you hear bits and pieces of things hidden inside of the music?
Again, I'm going to give you a really disappointing answer.
Damn it!
Yeah, sorry. I'm sorry. I'm not what you thought I was. Yeah. Now, I only really vaguely understand what Adrian is going on. I mean, he's sat down with me and gone, this is really what this is about. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Well, as long as you sing that bit in that key next time, I don't care what words you sing. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, you're seeing it through a production.
Exactly.
Right,
exactly. Right. So, we did go through it at the beginning, and the lyrics evolved and the concept evolved. And at the end, he's like, do you want to know what the concept is about now? And I was like, can we just finish this out? Come on, you can tell me later. Huh? He's got a lot to say. So look, I mean, he'll be very disappointed as well if he hears me say that. So maybe edit that out. No, we'll go and have a little talk now, so I can get up to speed. No, I mean, he knows that I'm the practical one, trying to keep his feet on the ground, and because he's a very, like I said, very passionate. Not to use the stereotype, but he's super passionate, super full of ideas and energy, and every now and then you need someone to say, great, but look, just finish the song, next song. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I wish I could take that a bit deeper with you. I appreciate that you have spent the time thinking about it. I'm one of those people who, when I have finished an album, rarely listens to it again.
I like this about you, though. I like the pragmatic aspect of you. I mean, you're doing a great job of promoting your producing abilities, because you're not getting too emotional about this piece of music. You're looking at it transitionally.
I mean, that is a rare thing, because actually I do, like, it's not that I've obviously spent a lot of time listening to it. We spent I think we spent weeks just perfecting the guitar tone. I mean, it was just unbelievable. The guy's attention to detail is quite something. so I really went on a journey. Really went on a journey with it, like with lyrics, without lyrics, all the different elements and depths and whatnot. And I know, and I find it easy to say because in a way I feel more like the midwife rather than the I know it's a fantastic baby. That's a really poor analogy. I'm sorry. You'd never call a baby fantastic, would you? Anyway, I know I have no I don't feel remotely self-conscious by saying I think it's a fantastic piece of work, and I'm really grateful that he badgered me. And I don't think he'd have let me not do it, or he'd have just been sending me those hour-long voice messages. So I'm really grateful he twisted my arm, and we agreed together. Like, I mean, it wasn't just me, chaperoning him. He was very much like as I say, to me, it's progressive in the sense that it doesn't really sound like anything I can directly compare it to. It's a really unique universe, but equally, he's quite old school. He's from Sao Paulo, Brazil, grew up with Sepultura and bands like that was really into the old school kind of thrash death metal stuff. And there's me, who's learned all these new production techniques and stuff. Yeah, but the guitars sound great, but listen to this ancient thrash metal album, and I'm like, oh yeah, but yeah, okay, I see what you mean. Like, there's some real edge or dirt, or and he's been forced me not to think of everything through the kind of 21st century lens, and really revisit. I mean, to be honest, it's brought me a bit closer to my kind of natural musical homeland as well, which everyone thinks of. Naturally, I think everyone associates me with the prog scene, but I think at most I'm probably about 20% prog. My kind of core DNA is just very old school hard rock, heavy metal. Iron Maiden, Helloween.
Wow.
I went through a big power metal phase. I'm not ashamed to admit that. In my teens,
right.
I think my progressive phase kind of came and went, and I was always into it a bit. Obviously starting with Dream Theater in the metal sphere, and then going backwards to the original prog bands, and also trying to follow it forwards with the newer bands as well. But there reached a point where I just got saturated with it because when you're in, I was in 2 prog metal bands at the same time, to be fair, and constantly absorbing and researching and trying to extract the best ideas and reinterpret them, and went so far down that path that now all I hear, even in the new stuff now all I just hear is the same elements. I'm like, people have been doing that stuff for 20 years now. It's not new, but just making it, producing it in different ways, I think is the main, it's more how people, I feel like the main developments in progressive metal have been the kind of sonic aspect and the kind of compositional aspect. So now I can at least appreciate it from that perspective, but compositionally, I don't know. As I said, I went so far down that rabbit hole. And I don't want to sound arrogant, but I just feel like I've heard all the elements before. Yeah. People just putting it together in different ways. So the irony in liking straight ahead 4/4 classic hard rock and metal is that the point is not to be original.
Yes. Well, but I mean, or to be fearless enough, Tom, to say that works.
Yeah.
Because when you listen to, I mean, I'll say it out loud, and I would love to have them on my show. I probably never will. I cannot stand Dream Theater anymore. I can't stand it. I don't like anything they do. Like after they did Train of Thought,
which was my last one.
It was that's an incredible record. It rocks. Yeah. There's still odd time signatures, but it doesn't try too hard. Yeah. Nowadays, it's noodle this and noodle that, and yes, they have the chops. Clearly, they have it, and everybody knows they have the chops. But they've whittled their fan base. Now, I get it. they're not looking at it from that point of view as a financial endeavor. But they've earned that with the 30 years. But they have their fan base is about 2 degrees wide. And it's guys who like lots of notes.
Yeah. I know. Well, you found your right audience here because they transformed my life with the first few albums. I mean, they were just absolutely sublime, absolutely inspired. And now, you can go back and actually maybe that was Kansas and that was Yes, just through Mesa or whatever. But but I mean, I don't want to criticize, and they've obviously got a method to their madness, and they're doing what makes them happy and stuff. But yeah, they took a path that I never expected them to. And like you, I mean, Train of Thought was the last one that I listened to, and actually, I'm not even sure I listened to all of that. By then, I was like,
same.
They're not the band that. I'll tell you what. I mean, this is one kind of lapsed Dream Theater fan to another. Right? One thing that's really surprised me is how well Falling into Infinity is aged. So I used to hate that one. But now I go back and like, that's really raw. Like, they really tried something new with that one. But let's not go too far into this because I don't want to alienate half the listeners.
I know. And my apologies to anybody listening. I don't mean to be a snob. It's just, it doesn't work for me anymore. That's all I have to say. Well, okay, let's go back to your record. That's what we're here for.
Sure.
Because you don't necessarily have an opinion on the lyrical content or the direction of the album, what about tracks? Of course, again, as I mentioned, I listened to the entire album. I really love Seed of Change, and I think I like that because it's right smack dab in the middle of the album. And if he's trying to make a point, if you as a duo are trying to make a point, that is the moment where the album seems to progress into something that there's a different feeling about the song. Thematically, it reminds me actually of my own youth, where there's this teenage wonder, but then there's a concern of where everything is going and are your hopes going to be met? And then with Reaching Deepness and Birth, the last track even has that ending effect on it, which I was thinking might be leading into another album someday. But
I hadn't thought about that.
Okay. But do you have a standout track?
I'll tell you my standout. I mean, I generally think they're all great compositions. I can't believe he's put together an album that is so kind of uniformly strong compositionally. In terms of rewriting and editing, it was only the smallest amount. Like already the bare bones were there. But yeah, I mean things evolved, and so I think for me, I can hear, I love them all. Right? I can hear which ones people might think of the standout tracks. But for me, the standout tracks might be the ones that evolve the most from how they started. So, for example, I mean, Adriano calls them the ugly ducklings, but there were, I think a couple of tracks different from What Was Missing and I Voice of Mine. At the time when I was recording them, I'm like, dude, these tracks are really boring, man. I don't know. I love all the other ones, but like these ones just kind of go on and on and on. Well, not on and on, but I wasn't really sure where they were going, or especially I Voice of Mine. I didn't understand that. I'm like, it just keeps repeating and repeating. And it's like, okay, so he chopped stuff around and wrote extra bits, and we, tried different ideas and stuff. And I Voice of Mine especially transformed from being the one I just absolutely hated to me like a real. I mean, they're all strong, but he really transformed that one. And then different from What It Was Missing because his original vocal ideas were just so terrible. So by the end, it's like, dude, you've really got it together. So
I am not emailing him this track.
He really. I mean, I think he will freely admit it. Like, we went through a journey on the album. We grew. Like when I picked up the bass, I hadn't really done anything serious with it for quite some time. I'd done a bit of low-key session music on, session recording on albums that I wasn't even mentioned on because I didn't want to be mentioned on them. But I've done quite a bit of that, but nothing demanding. And when I recorded him a load of stuff, I think maybe I was just thinking from the point of view, I don't want to get in the way. I don't want to. I mean, supportive and as they were of my bass playing at the time, I think the guys in Haken did get a bit sick of me just shredding all the time. Now I completely understand. They're like, dude, just less notes. And I think by the time we got to the mountain, stuff was starting getting removed from the final recordings.
Look at me go. Look.
Yeah,
Look.
I mean, it wasn't so much that. It's just that I always wanted to say something. And I think now my instinct is not to say something unless you have to, or like you really feel strongly that you want to say something. Otherwise, just don't say anything. And so my initial recordings, I sent over probably some quite restrained ideas, and he was like, "Man, where's the, where are your licks and stuff?" And I'm like, "Oh, right, okay." So, the fact that there's as much bass noodling on this album as there is a lot down to him saying, "Oh yeah, bass solo here, bass solo here." I'm like, dude, there's more bass solos than guitar solos, and I think there's only 2 guitar solos on the album, but there's probably a bass solo. Like, it's not that ridiculous, but yeah. So he really forced me to, again, so from my perspective, he was the one saying, no, more like this, or he never said less, interestingly. Right, so that really, and for those of you who haven't heard the album, please, it is not just a bass shred fest. It really isn't.
No, it's not.
But he was always asking for more. So if ever you hear like a little bass lick sticking out here, that was probably him saying, "Right, okay, 1 minute 32, 1 minute 38, bass solo, 2 minutes 35 to not bass solo, but licks." He always wanted some licks. So. And again, I think he had excellent judgment on that. So, that was in answer to what is the standout track. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, somehow.
Well, whatever. So for me, as I said, the ones that were most different from the demos are the standouts, just because they surprised me in a good way. But I think they're all great. Like, it's a real, come on this journey, people. It's just, and also it's so dark and intense, but not dark in a gloomy, depressing kind of way. Just, I mean, the fact that the album cover's black, I think it just sums up the color of the album.
Yeah. I think you've said it well. The hand, where did you come up with I don't know if that's a logo or where was the design for that? The album.
So, even, the album cover was done even before the album. Adriano basically said, "Look, I've found this Italian artist, Luigi Quarta, and I've asked him to do a bunch." And like, that is one of several awesome possible designs, but you could only choose one in the end. I think he's going to save the others for the next albums probably, but
great.
He just decided to get these album covers done, and then he's like, right, now I'm going to make an album. So as far as I'm aware, that was already there even before the music. But he had this concept. The name is based on an Amazonian butterfly. That's where the little butterfly comes up. I don't know how common they are or what the significance is of this butterfly, but it's a thing for him. And he'd formed the whole concept for the band, the image, the musical concept, even before like actually writing the music, which I think is quite a bold thing. And probably necessary, to be honest, to have that kind of clarity of vision. To pull off something like this, you've got to be absolutely fixated on, and he was, during the whole production process, it was very much, yes, it's great, but it's just not quite how I want it. I'm like, oh, how do you want it? So, well, the guitars need to sound like Jeff Loomis, and the drums need to sound like, so there's a lot of research went into the sounds, and I don't know if the guitars do sound like Jeff Loomis in the end, but I think they sound pretty massive.
They do.
So, yeah, again, I'm sorry. My short-term memory is not what it was.
No, it's this is all so wonderful. The reality is, again, selfishly, I could sit here and listen to you talk all day. You know, it's funny that musicians that we enjoyed in a different part of their career, you know, again, me going back and originally discovering you through, you know, the Haken experience. It's really easy for fans to look at this and say, oh, this is a celebrity, or this is, again, a musical hero, and there's these assumptions we make. And what I've enjoyed so much about today, Tom, I mean, maybe the most of any interview I've ever done, is just listening to a guy talk about the truth, right? It isn't so much about look where I've been and look where I'm going, but it's just making statements, and again, being very pragmatic about your life experiences. And so for me, that's been a real joy and honor. I know I say those words a lot, but it is true. So before I let you go, I was wondering, if you don't mind, I would love to go back to the very, very beginning of little Tom's life, because I'm curious about this. How did you fall in love with music? You know, is there a story that you're open to sharing?
It's a good story, actually. God, how self-obsessed does that sound? But it is, because now that you make me think about it, it's remarkable that I got into music at all, because I think until I was 6 or 7, no, wait, I must have been a bit older than that. When did I'm figuring some things out. So basically, I don't know, 7 or 8 or whatever, and I went on a walk with my dad and said, you know, like, I think he was just trying to figure out what interests to get his kid into, because clearly I didn't have any specific interests at that point. Mm-hmm. He was probably like, oh, I've got to get him into something. And maybe I wasn't enjoying all the golf lessons that he was trying to make me do. And so we went for a walk. He said, oh, you know, do you think you might be into music? And I was like, yeah, maybe. And he bought me the Guns N' Roses album.
Oh, wow.
And I listened to that Guns N' Roses album. I must have been, so how old was I? No, I must have been 9 or 8. When did...
It came out in 87.
So 87 was Appetite for Distraction, so it wouldn't have been that one. Use Your Illusion was 91?
91, yeah.
So I'd have been 8.
Okay.
Yeah, so I listened to Use Your Illusion 1 every day until Use Your Illusion 2 came out. Wow. And then I listened to Use Your Illusion every day. And I say every day, like 10 times a day.
Wow. Yeah, it was the soundtrack of your life. Yeah.
So Guns N' Roses, and I was obsessed. And then I was obsessed with Slash, obviously. I didn't have a guitar at that point, but I was just obsessed. And then my next big love was Megadeth.
Wow.
After that. So went from Guns N' Roses to Megadeth. And everyone at school genuinely called me Marty because I wouldn't shut up about Marty Friedman. I just like, listen to Marty Friedman solos. And actually to this day, and maybe I can just squeeze in a mention of another project that I'm working on at the moment.
Please.
Which is quite an old school, kind of fairly old school thrashy death kind of thing, which is totally not the kind of thing I would have thought to get involved in. But for me, that's going to be my homage to Marty Friedman, because it's just so many opportunities for ridiculous thrash shred indulgence. But so Slash, Marty Friedman, then it was Steve Vai and John Petrucci, and then it was just jazz.
Oh
and jazz is a whole other story, because I've kind of gone in and out of jazz, and I've never really, I've just never been good enough at it to call myself a jazz musician, but it's always on the periphery, and it's what I always come back to when I'm burnt out on anything with loud drums in it. So anyway, that's the story. My dad basically decided that I had to have a hobby, and it just happened to be music, and I obviously obsessed over it and never stopped obsessing, really.
Yeah.
in a way. So
Yeah.
there you go.
Well, no, it's lovely. And it proves, based on the beginning of our conversation to here, that I live near Seattle, and, we've never met until today. And yet I knew who you were. I knew some of the music you had created with former bandmates and what you're doing now. And here we are talking, right? So it goes to show you that if you fall in love with something and you pursue it, you may never achieve what, you see, quote unquote, famous people doing. But you've achieved something so spectacular, and you've left a mark, and you continue to leave them, and they're good marks. They're important. And someday there's going to be some kid who talks on a podcast to somebody else in the future who's going to say, I was influenced by, Tom MacLean or Athemon or, early Haken or whatever. And it's because of what you've created. So it's pretty extraordinary, Tom. You've done the thing, and the thing is rare. So congratulations, and thank you so much for being here.
You're extremely kind, Rob. I really enjoyed that. Not just listen to myself talk, but listen to what you have to say and your perspectives. And well, that was cathartic, right?